All right, so we're gonna do the last video I was running out of time. So this is a guy named Aristophanes. All right, and we're actually going to do a mathematical problem with the same problem that Aristophanes faced. Um, I'll do it in a separate video than I'm doing today. So Aristophanes lived, a little more than 2,000 years ago, and he made um, an interesting measurement. All right, so let me give you a little bit of background, okay? So Aristophanes was the curator of the great um, library in Alexandria, Egypt. All right. So this was that was his job, and so as the story goes, I mean he was a really good mathematician and well read individual, and he stumbled across, as the story goes, he stumbled across an interesting, or what he found interesting, little scroll that said that on a certain day, which actually turned out to be about June 21st, right? Which that's of course the summer solstice. So the summer solstice in the northern hemisphere. So on that day, um, he found, or he read. Okay, so there's a nice picture. I'll go back to that last. He found that the scroll said that on the first day of summer, um, which the Greeks knew well. They knew about the first day of summer. I mean that had been established, a long time ago. That further down the Nile River, there was a little town called Syene. All right, and what was special is that on the first day of summer, um, the if a person could look down a well that was um, dug straight down, and not see any shadow. There wouldn't be any shadow on the walls. Like, in other words, the sun shone directly overhead on that day. And that happens. If you're on the Tropic of Cancer, I mean that's what that's all about. The Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn in the southern hemisphere. Anyhow, that happens on the first day of spring, um, and that was an interesting little piece of information for this guy named Aristophanes, again, who was the chief librarian, the head of the librarians at the Great Library of Alexandria. Now, it's really what he does with the information that becomes this story that I'm telling you right now. So that's wonderful. He finds that the in, in this well in a town called Syene, which is pretty far away from Alexandria, that the sun was directly overhead. And so being the mathematician that he was, he realized that, hey, if I could measure the distance between Alexandria, which is in northern Egypt, and Syene, which is towards the southern part of Egypt, really just along the Nile River. If I could measure that distance, and then measure the angle of the sun in Alexandria on that same day, I could work out the circumference of the planet. Right? Remember, the Greeks, most Greeks at the time had realized, certainly from Aristotle, that the world was round, right? I mean that the shadow of the moon, and the fact that if you looked at a ship going out to sea, that you would see the mast disappear last. I mean, that pretty much proves that the world is round. Anyhow, Aristophanes decided, hey, you know what? If I could figure out the distance to Syene, this little town, I would I would be able to measure, and of course he had to measure the shadow that I think he measured an obelisk. This is just you literally could just put a stick straight up and down on the first day of summer and then measure the shadow, right? And that's basically what he did. He used an obelisk, but that doesn't really matter. And so what he did is, when he did this, he found that the angle was 7 degrees, whereas in Syene, the angle, there was no angle. It was 0, right? So it was directly overhead. And the other assumption that he made, which turns out to be true, is that the rays of light that come in, that the sun was so far away that when the rays of light hit the earth, they hit the earth in a parallel manner, right? So these are all parallel to each other, these rays of light. That's actually turns out to be pretty important. All right, so again, now he's stuck with having to know, he just needs to know the distance to Syene. And so as the story goes, we don't know who it was or anything like that. He paid someone to literally walk the steps to Syene and then walk all the way back, right? So he actually got an average, right? Well, the person counted their steps and then counted their steps on the way back. Okay, so it turns out, I mean, it's a long distance, right? It's 800 kilometers. So that's a long ways to get to Syene, right? So it's not like he did this overnight. This took him a long time. Whoever it was, the name of that person has been lost to history. We have no idea who it was. And I often think, as I've told this story many times over the years, is Aristophanes must have paid the guy, probably, I don't know, if you paid him half, maybe the guy just takes off, never comes back and doesn't give you the information. But he probably paid him, a certain amount. And then he told him that, if you come back, I'll pay you even more. Maybe he paid him about one quarter. I don't know. I'm just making this up. So you paid him a certain amount. And then the guy walks and then comes back and then reports the number and the number of steps, literally the number of steps, and then Aristophanes paid him the rest of the money, which presumably would be more, so that to encourage the guy to come back. All right. So anyhow, he does this, and of course Aristophanes had measured this angle very carefully on the first day of summer, and he found that it was about 7 degrees. And so if you take 7 divided by 360, right? So that's 7 divided by 360 is the same ratio as this distance, which turns out to be 800 kilometers, to the circumference of the Earth, right? And so then you set up an algebraic equation, and that's what I'll do. I'll show you how to do this. It's really pretty easy. And you solve for the circumference of the Earth, and he got a value of more than. It actually turns out to be about 41. More than 41,000 kilometers, which was not bad actually for paying some dude to walk this distance and measuring the angle of an obelisk. He got a number that was you know, not too bad. I think he was within like 20% error, which is pretty amazing. I mean, that you're talking about more than 2,000 years ago and getting a number that's relatively close, relatively close. Obviously it's not super precise or anything like that, but at least gave the Greeks and anybody who read about this a sense of how big the Earth was, right? I mean that's remember more than 1,000 years after this, you know, or more than 1,500 years, Columbus takes this trip, uh, from Spain and has no idea, how far he's going to try. He thinks he's going to, Columbus thinks he's going to go to Asia. I mean, he thinks that he's going to run into Asia, um, and Aristophanes had worked out the size of the Earth. All right, so that's the story of Aristophanes, and that's all right. So and of course, once you could actually work out, once the actual size of the Earth is determined, the absolute size of the distances to the sun and the moon could be determined, because you can know, how many Earths it takes to get to the moon, how many Earth diameters, and so forth. Just using, geometry, you could actually work that out. And then, people knew certainly that the sun was 400 times the distance to the moon, so you could work out the distance to the moon as well. All right, but these weren't super accurate numbers, not compared to the modern values that we have. So that's the story, of Aristophanes. All right, so here, let's move on. All right, so now, for a long time, people had been observing the stars and how they changed with the seasons, the different positions with the seasons. Of course, the stars wander, um, towards the east, and there were particular objects, and they actually got names, and the Greeks called them planets, and so these were points of light that, they particularly bright points of light, and they would move with respect to the background of stars. And so the planets, there were five that were known during the time. Of course, Mercury. But by the way, Mercury is really hard to see. I mean, you really have to be looking out for Mercury, because it's so close to the sun that you only see Mercury, maybe for an hour or so, hour and a half after sunset, and maybe an hour and a half right before sunrise. If in that's with all the conditions are just perfect. There's it's hard to see Mercury anyhow. So Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. So those are the five planets that were known at the time. Right, and so the planets moved, and they always appeared in the constellations of the zodiac. Well, we know now that there's, there are actually 12. Historically there were 12 constellations of the zodiac, but we now know that there's a 13th. It's not considered a constellation of the zodiac, because the sun is only in Ophiuchus for about a week or so, whereas the other constellations of the zodiac, the sun is in there for about a month. But the planets follow that as well. All right, so they follow the constellations of the zodiac, and the reason, of course, is because the solar system is flat. Right, the plane of the solar system is where you find the planets. All right, so let's see. I'm running out of time. I'll pick this up in the next one.